I woke to the smell of antiseptic, a chemical spike driving straight into my brain. My eyes snapped open. The white ceiling tiles swam above me, and my head felt like it was stuffed with the static of a dozen different TV channels. Two sets of memories, two entire lives, were crashing together inside my skull. One life belonged to Michael Thompson, age 28, a spectacular failure. A guy who'd just lost everything playing the futures market on margin, including a $500,000 emergency loan he'd siphoned from his father-in-law's company. A guy who had ended it all with a final, desperate leap from a rooftop. The other life also belonged to Michael Thompson. But this was a Michael 10 years from now, a titan of finance forged in the brutal wars of Wall Street, the architect of a $100 billion empire. That Michael had died in a fiery explosion, the result of a rival's last, psychotic act of sabotage. Two Michaels, two completely different paths, had somehow converged on this summer afternoon in 2024, inside this one young body that still faintly echoed with the whistling wind of a skyscraper's edge. I was back 10 years, right at the exact moment where it had all gone wrong. The hospital room door swung open without a knock. The sharp, cold clicks of heels on the linoleum floor announced her arrival. Each step was an assertion of power, a sound that demanded submission. I turned my head and saw her. Jessica Miller, my wife, in name at least. She wore a perfectly tailored black suit that made her skin look like porcelain. Her face was a masterpiece of fine-boned artistry, but her eyes held the unforgiving chill of a winter lake. "You're awake," she said. Her voice was as cold and sharp as the rest of her. Behind her stood her assistant and two bodyguards in dark suits, a procession better suited for closing a hostile takeover than visiting a husband in the hospital. Then again, she was here to close a deal. Our divorce. The assistant, Sarah, stepped forward. She slapped a file folder and an ink pad onto the bedside table with a sharp crack, her contempt for me a palpable thing in the sterile air. "Michael, stop playing dead," Sarah said, her voice dripping with disdain for the kept man she saw before her. "Jessica's time is precious. These are the divorce papers. Sign them, and we can all move on." I looked at the papers, then back up at Jessica. In my other life, the original Michael had been in this exact room when they forced him to sign. He had sobbed, begged her not to leave him like a dog being abandoned. All it earned him was a deeper disgust, and the final, cutting words, "I never loved you." He signed, walked away with nothing but the clothes on his back, and drank himself to death in a rain-soaked alley 6 months later. But he wasn't here anymore. What are you staring at? Sarah snapped when I didn't move. The fact that we're not pressing charges for the $500,000 you embezzled from Mr. Miller's company is an act of charity. What more do you want? To drag this out forever? I ignored her, my eyes fixed on Jessica. A flicker of impatience crossed her perfect face, her brow tightening slightly. "Michael, this should have ended a long time ago. Our marriage was a mistake. I'm done living with it." I tried to smile, but my throat was a desert. My voice came out as a dry rasp. "Water." The room went still. They had expected tears, hysterics, maybe even threats. They had not expected a single calm word. Jessica recovered first, giving Sarah a slight nod. Sarah, looking annoyed, poured a cup of water from the pitcher and handed it to me as if she were feeding an animal at the zoo. I drank it all, handed the cup back, and picked up the divorce agreement, flipping slowly through the pages. The terms were generous. To her, I would leave with nothing. All my debts were my own, including the $500,000 I owed her family. As a severance, she would give me $10,000. 10 grand, the price of a man's last shred of dignity. "Michael, are you going to sign this today or not?" Sarah's patience had evaporated. I finally lifted my gaze to meet hers. My eyes were calm, empty of any discernible emotion. That placid stare seemed to unnerve her. She flinched, the rest of her tirade dying in her throat. "I'll sign the papers," I said. My voice was quiet, but it resonated in the silent room. A flicker of surprise, almost imperceptible, crossed Jessica's eyes. She had clearly been prepared for a fight. "But," I added, my tone shifting, "not right now." "What kind of game are you playing?" Sarah demanded, instantly on guard. I kept my focus on Jessica. "Give me 3 months. In 3 months, if you still want a divorce, I'll sign." and I'll pay back the $500,000, every last cent. A wave of stifled, mocking laughter filled the room. Sarah's was the loudest. She covered her mouth, her shoulders shaking. Pay it back? With what, Michael? Do you have even $500 to your name? Stop dreaming. Jessica didn't laugh, but the frost in her eyes deepened. She looked at me like I was a clown performing a particularly pathetic trick. Michael, this farce is over. I don't have time for these childish games. We'll see if it's a game in 3 months, I said, leaning back against the pillows. My body was weak, but my voice was firm. For these 3 months, we are still married. Only a place to live. And I'll need $20,000 in seed money. Sarah actually snorted this time. Jessica, do you hear this? Not only does he want to keep living in your house, he wants 20 grand. Did he land on his head when he jumped? Jessica's expression darkened completely. She saw this as a pathetic delay tactic, an attempt to annoy her with impossible demands. Michael, my patience has its limits. So does mine, I said, meeting her gaze head on. I know you don't trust me. That's fair. But you're a businesswoman, Jessica. You understand venture capital. $20,000 is a small bet. What if, just what if, I can actually turn it into $500,000 in 3 months? That's a hell of a return on investment. I used the term venture capital on purpose. I knew that for Jessica, the world was a balance sheet of costs and benefits. Appealing to her emotions was a losing battle, but appealing to her business sense, that might just work. Just as I'd hoped, she fell silent. She studied me, her eyes analytical. The man in front of her was nothing like the weak, insecure husband who used to follow her around like a lost puppy. He was calm, terrifyingly calm. It wasn't an act. It was a deep, bone-bred confidence, the kind that came from knowing you held all the cards. It was a look she'd only ever seen on the faces of the most powerful titans of industry. It was absurd. How could a failed day trader who just tried to kill himself possess that kind of certainty? What's your collateral? She finally asked. Me, I said. I'm the collateral. 3 months. If I don't have the money, I'm yours to do with as you please. Not only will I sign the papers, I'll take out a full-page ad in the Wall Street Journal, publicly declaring that I was an incompetent fool who was never worthy of you. It was a brutal offer. For any man, it was the ultimate public castration. Jessica stared at me for a full 30 seconds. The only sound in the room was the soft hum of the hospital equipment. Finally, as if making a calculated business decision, she gave her answer. Fine, she said, the single word cutting through the tension. You have 3 months. Sarah, transfer him $20,000, and he can return to the mansion. But he stays in the guest room. With that, she turned and walked away. The sound of her heels faded down the hall, decisive and final, without a hint of looking back. Sarah, though visibly furious, did as she was told. She pulled out her phone and reluctantly tapped at the screen. A moment later, my phone buzzed. A notification glowed on the screen. A direct deposit of $20,000 from Miller Corp has been credited to your account. There's your money. Don't try any more stupid tricks, Sarah hissed, glaring at me before hurrying out after her boss with the bodyguards in tow. I was alone again. I looked at the number on my phone and took a deep breath. The antiseptic smell didn't seem so sharp anymore. 10 years. I was back. Jessica and everyone else who had ground me into the dust. Our game was just beginning. After checking out the hospital, I took an Uber back to the mansion in the exclusive North Shore suburbs. It was Jessica's property, and for the 3 years of our marriage, I had felt less like a husband and more like a tenant on sufferance. The housekeeper, Maria, always looked at me with a mixture of pity and contempt. Mr. Thompson, you're back, she said, blocking my path to the main staircase. Her tone was formal, robotic. Ms. Miller called. Your things have been moved to the first floor guest room. I just nodded. I expected as much. The old Michael would have thrown a fit, demanding to stay in the study next to the master bedroom, just to be near Jessica, only to be humiliatingly shut down. I didn't care about any of that now. The guest room was small, but immaculate. I dropped my bag, locked the door, and immediately fired up the desktop computer in the corner. $20,000. It was my first and only stake. I had to turn it into $1 million, then $10 million as fast as possible. For someone with a decade of future knowledge, the money-making opportunities were endless. I could go long on gold, corner the market on some future collectible, or bet on a few obscure tech stocks that were about to become legends. But all of that was too slow. I needed an explosion. My eyes settled on an icon on the desktop, a crypto trading platform. In 2024, the crypto market was a wasteland. A massive crash had wiped out fortunes, and the words Bitcoin and scam were practically interchangeable in the mainstream. The original Michael had been one of its victims, going all in on a leveraged long position based on a bogus insider tip. He was liquidated overnight. But I remembered something else. In 3 days, an obscure altcoin called Nightfall Network Coin, or NNC, was going to be quietly adopted by a massive dark web marketplace for its revolutionary anonymity protocol. Overnight, its price would launch from 1/100th of a cent to over $1, a 1,000-fold increase. For anyone else, it was a blind gamble. For me, it was a sure thing. I quickly created an account, wired the entire 20,000, converted it to USDT, and found the trading pair for NNC. The chart was pathetic. The 24-hour volume was a few $1,000s. The order book was a ghost town. The price history was a flat line scraping along the absolute bottom. The comment section was a graveyard of broken dreams and angry tirades. What a piece of crap. Hasn't moved a tick in 3 months. Devs rugged us all. Anyone still holding this is an idiot. My sell order is at 0.0005. Please, someone take these bags off my hands. I smiled and placed a single buy order for my entire balance at the current market price of $0.001. Instantly, my order consumed every single sell order on the books, hoovering up all the cheap coins like a black hole. My $20,000, converted to USDT, had just bought me over 15 million NNC tokens. Done. I closed the laptop and leaned back, exhaling slowly. The seed was planted. Now all I had to do was wait for it to grow. The next 2 days passed in an almost meditative quiet. I stayed in the guest room, either mapping out the next decade of global economic shifts on my laptop or doing light exercises to recover my strength. I made no attempt to see Jessica, and she seemed more than happy to pretend I didn't exist, leaving early and coming home late. This strange peace was shattered on the evening of the 3rd day by the arrival of an unwelcome guest. "Michael, you piece of trash. You still have the nerve to live here." A loud, arrogant voice echoed from the living room. I opened my door to see Kevin Reed. He was dressed head to toe in designer labels, his hair slicked back with too much product. He was lounging on the sofa, legs crossed, as Maria nervously served him a drink. Kevin, my old college roommate, my so-called best friend. It was this best friend who had fed me the phony tip about the futures market, encouraging me to leverage up, knowing it would destroy me. In my future memory, after the original Michael's death, Kevin felt zero guilt. In fact, he made a fortune shorting the same position he'd told me to long. He'd gone on to become a slick portfolio manager and, in the ultimate insult, had tried to pursue Jessica. He was the architect of my first ruin, a complete and utter snake. Seeing me, Kevin stood up, a cruel, mocking smile spreading across his face. Well, if it isn't the investment guru himself. I heard you took a little flight. Too bad you didn't stick the landing. Guess you're tough to kill." He looked me up and down, his eyes shining with sadistic pleasure. "Still, it's for the best. This way, you get a front row seat to watch Jessica throw you out like the garbage you are." The old Michael had trusted this man completely, right up to the bitter end. I stared at him, my expression like a sheet of ice. "Kevin, who let you in?" He blinked, thrown off by my tone. In his world, I was the timid follower who hung on his every word. "Huh, somebody grew a spine while they were in a coma. That's cute," he sneered. "Jessica sent for me. She was worried you might try to pull another stupid stunt. So, she asked me to come talk some sense into you." He reached into his wallet, pulled out a thick wad of $100 bills, and contemptuously threw them on the floor in front of me. "Here," he said, "take it and get out. Stop bothering Jessica. You and her. You're not even in the same universe." The green bills scattered across the expensive rug, a silent testament to my supposed worthlessness. Maria watched from the side, looking like she wanted to disappear. I didn't even glance at the money. I walked slowly, deliberately, until I was standing right in front of him. I was a good half-foot taller, and as I looked down at him, an invisible pressure seemed to settle over the room. Kevin instinctively took a step back, his bravado faltering. What? What do you think you're doing? Don't you dare touch me. Kevin, I said, my voice low and cold. That $500,000 hole I was in, that was your setup, wasn't it? The color drained from his face. What? What the hell are you talking about? You got greedy, you listened to bad advice. That's not my problem. His eyes darted away. He was a terrible liar. Is that so? I let out a humorless laugh. You better pray I never find proof. Because if I do, I'll let the threat hang in the air. I raised my hand and gently, almost delicately, patted his cheek twice. It was a light touch, but it carried the weight of 1,000 insults. Kevin's face turned a blotchy, furious red. Humiliation and rage boiled up inside him. But as he looked into my dead calm eyes, a primal fear seemed to shoot up his spine. He didn't move. He didn't dare. Just then, the front door opened. Jessica was home. She took in the scene. Me standing over a terrified Kevin, money scattered on the floor, and her brow furrowed in immediate anger. What is going on in here? Kevin scrambled to her side, like she was his savior. Jessica, you have to see this. I came here out of the goodness of my heart. And he tried to attack me. Jessica's gaze fell on me, colder than ever. Michael, what is your problem now? I retracted my hand and slid into my pocket, watching them both with the detached air of someone observing a particularly bad play. I don't have a problem, I said evenly. I was just giving your friend here a piece of advice about being a decent human being. You, Kevin sputtered, speechless with rage. Jessica clearly didn't believe a word I said. In her mind, I was the irrational, emotional wreck, and Kevin was the successful, respectable son of her father's old friend. That's enough, she said, cutting me off. Kevin, you should go. I'll handle my own family matters. Jessica, I'm just worried about him. Go, she repeated, her tone leaving no room for argument. Defeated, Kevin shot me a venomous look and stalked out. As he passed through the door, he mouthed 2 words at me. You're dead. Now, it was just me and Jessica in the living room, with Maria holding her breath in the corner. The temperature seemed to drop 20 degrees. The 3 months I gave you were not an invitation to cause trouble in my home, Jessica said, her voice laced with disappointment and fatigue. If this happens again, our agreement is terminated. I wasn't causing trouble, I replied calmly, and the agreement won't be terminated, because I keep my promises. Keep your promises? She looked at me as if I just claimed I could fly. With that $20,000? I had my office check. You threw all of it into some garbage coin called Nightfall Network. Michael, you're hopeless. Wasn't losing everything once enough for you. So, she'd been tracking my funds. Of course she had. For someone with her resources, it was child's play. We'll see if it's garbage in the morning, I said, offering no further explanation. There's no point arguing with someone who doesn't believe you. The truth is the only argument that matters. I turned and went back to my room, closing the door behind me, leaving her standing alone in the cavernous living room, her expression a mixture of anger and confusion. She couldn't possibly comprehend where my baffling confidence was coming from. That night, I slept like a stone. Jessica, however, barely slept at all. The next morning, I was woken by a frantic pounding on my door. It was Sarah's voice, strained with a combination of disbelief and panic. Michael, get out here right now. I got out of bed, stretched, and opened the door. Jessica and Sarah were both standing there. Jessica was in her usual business attire, but the permanent mask of ice on her face had developed a significant crack. Sarah was flushed, clutching a tablet to her chest, as if it were a holy relic. Tell me, did you have insider information? How did you know? Sarah shoved the tablet in my face, her voice trembling. On the screen was the crypto trading platform. The price chart for Nightfall Network coin wasn't a line anymore. It was a single, massive, vertical green pillar that shot straight to the top of the screen. The price was frozen at $1.02. And at the top of the page, my account balance was a long string of numbers that made Sarah's head spin. Cifrão 15,234,567,89 USDT. $15.2 million. Insider information? I asked, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. No, I just bought it for fun. For fun. Sarah's voice cracked. You call this for fun? You turned $20,000 into $15 million overnight. She sputtered, unable to form a coherent sentence. Jessica hadn't said a word, but her eyes were locked on my face. For the first time since I'd known her, that glacial composure was completely shattered, replaced by pure, unadulterated shock. In all her years in business, she'd seen hostile takeovers, corporate miracles, overnight successes, but they all followed a certain logic. What I had done felt like divine intervention. It defied every rule she knew. 20 grand. One night. 15 million. It broke her entire understanding of risk and reward. Just got lucky, I guess, I said with a shrug. I took the tablet from Sarah's trembling hands and, right in front of them, started selling. The market was in a frenzy. My massive sell orders were instantly devoured by a tidal wave of hype-driven buyers. When the last transaction cleared, my account balance was locked in. I converted the entire USDT balance to US dollars. Then, I opened my banking app and initiated a wire transfer. You have successfully sent a wire transfer of $500,000 to the account of Robert Miller. Robert Miller, Jessica's father. I took a screenshot of the confirmation and texted it to Jessica. The debt is paid, I said, looking her straight in the eye. Our 3-month agreement has 88 days left. Jessica stared at her phone, her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. Her entire corporate empire netted a few $100 million a year in profit. In a single night, I had generated a month's worth of her company's earnings. The impact was seismic. Who are you? She finally whispered. The man in front of her was a complete stranger. I'm your husband, Michael, I said with a small smile. I stepped closer, standing near enough to smell the faint jasmine scent of her perfume, to see her long eyelashes flutter in disbelief. So I asked softly, am I still welcome to stay here? My question left Jessica in a long, profound silence. Her legendary logic and judgment felt useless in the face of the brutal, beautiful fact of $15 million. She couldn't read me anymore. A person's personality, their skills, even their vision could be faked. But this Midas touch, this prescience, that was impossible to pretend. Finally, without answering my question, she turned and walked away. Her retreat was no longer decisive and sharp. It was hurried. Sarah was still frozen in the hallway, staring at me as if I were an alien. How did you do that? She stammered. I told you. Luck, I said and closed the door. I could hear her agitated breathing outside. I knew what happened today would rip through Jessica's world like a hurricane. And it was only the beginning. I spent the next hour wiring the remaining millions to several newly opened bank accounts. Then, I put on a clean set of clothes and walked out of the mansion. My first order of business wasn't to celebrate. It was to incorporate. I was starting an investment firm. The name was already decided. Horizon Capital. For a man reborn from the future, what greater capital was there than the horizon itself? The next month was a blur of activity. I leased a sleek office in a downtown skyscraper, hired a small, sharp team of traders and analysts. Not to predict the future, but to execute my vision flawlessly. I was the brain, they were the nervous system. Using the timeline etched into my memory, I began targeting a series of investments that were poised to explode. A video game studio on the verge of bankruptcy that was about to release a genre-defining mobile game. A small biotech firm whose obscure patent would soon make its stock skyrocket 100-fold. A barren patch of industrial wasteland on the edge of the city, where in 1 year's time, the governor would announce the site of a new tech corridor. These were my cheat codes to the world. Horizon Capital moved like a shark in deep water, silent and unseen, swallowing up assets everyone else had dismissed as worthless. My life transformed. I moved out of Jessica's mansion and into a penthouse apartment near my office. The cheap clothes were replaced by bespoke suits. I wasn't trying to be flashy, but the confidence that comes with immense wealth is a fundamental change, an aura of control that permeates everything. I had almost no contact with Jessica during that month. We were like two parallel lines, aware of each other, but never touching. I knew she was watching me, though. Sarah had a funny habit of bumping into me around town, fishing for information. I was happy to let her report back. I knew that to a professional like Jessica, every move I made looked insane, heretical. Buying a failing company? Investing in a polluted patch of dirt? In her eyes, I must have looked like a lottery winner on a suicidal spending spree, destined to lose it all. They were all waiting for me to fall. Only I knew how big the game I was playing really was. The turning point came at a high-profile charity gala. The old Michael would never have even made it past the velvet ropes. But Michael Thompson, the enigmatic founder of the cash-rich Horizon Capital, was one of the guests of honor. When I walked into the ballroom in a perfectly fitted Armani tuxedo, I felt the ripple of whispers and stares. Among them were Jessica and, at her side, Kevin Reed. Kevin's jaw practically hit the floor when he saw me. He'd obviously heard the rumors of my crypto windfall, but had dismissed them as bluster. Now, seeing the suit, the confident way I carried myself, the sheer aura of success, his face twisted into a mask of pure jealousy. New money, he sneered at Jessica, just loud enough for me to overhear. Gets lucky once and thinks he's king of the world. Just you watch, Jessica. He'll come crashing down harder than anyone you've ever seen. Jessica said nothing, just sipped her champagne, her gaze on me, complex and unreadable. She had to admit, the man across the room was a world away from the one who'd worn a hospital gown a month ago. He had a light around him now, powerful, self-assured, even dazzling. The auction began. The first few items came and went. Then came the main event, a plot of land. It was the parcel directly adjacent to the one I had already quietly acquired, the industrial wasteland. The opening bid was set at $5 million. A collective scoff went through the room. Everyone knew that land was worthless. $500,000 would have been a stretch. The auctioneer's call was met with dead silence. Kevin was practically glowing with schadenfreude. See, he whispered to Jessica. I told you, only an idiot would buy land out there. His words were still hanging in the air when I raised my paddle. $6 million. The entire ballroom went quiet, then erupted in murmurs. Everyone was looking at me like I had lost my mind. Kevin laughed out loud. He's crazy. He's actually certifiably insane. Jessica, are you seeing this? That's your ex-husband, a complete and utter fool. Jessica's brow was furrowed in a tight line. She couldn't comprehend my move either. The auctioneer, thrilled to have a bidder, called out, $6 million going once, $6 million going twice. Just as the gavel was about to fall, another voice cut in. $7 million. I turned. It was Kyle Donovan, son of the real estate mogul Patrick Donovan. Kyle was a spoiled playboy, but his father was a ruthless operator. I smiled. The fish was on the hook. Kyle clearly didn't want the land. He just saw a chance to mess with the new guy in town, drive up the price, and make me look stupid. $8 million, I said without blinking. $9 million. Kyle shot back, getting into it. The price climbed, quickly passing $10 million, then 15. The crowd was mesmerized. This wasn't an auction anymore. It was a duel between two madmen. Kevin was flushed with excitement. Let him have it. Let him have it, he urged Jessica. Let him spend $20 million on a toxic waste dump. He'll be ruined. Jessica's expression grew more and more tense. She thought she was watching me self-destruct in real time. When I bid $25 million, Kyle finally hesitated. He was a jerk, but he wasn't a complete moron. $25 million going once. $25 million going twice. I raised my champagne flute in a silent toast to Kyle, a playful, challenging smile on my face. The look said it all. You got the guts? Goaded by my expression, Kyle's ego took over. He started to raise his paddle, but his father, Patrick Donovan, who had been watching silently, reached out and put a firm hand on his son's arm, shaking his head. Kyle slumped back in his seat, fuming. Sold. For $25 million. The gavel fell. A wave of pitying, mocking whispers filled the room. Kevin was on his feet, practically applauding. He strode over to me, his face alight with triumphant glee. Congratulations, Mr. Thompson. A truly epic purchase. $25 million for a scrapyard. You're a legend. I ignored him and walked straight to Jessica. Right now, I said, looking her directly in the eye, you're probably thinking I've lost for good, aren't you? She paused, then gave a slow, deliberate nod. That was not a rational investment. You think so? I smiled. How about we make one more bet? Bet on what? On this land, I said, my voice low and intense. 1 month. I bet its value increases tenfold. If I win, the divorce agreement is null and void. We tear it up. If I lose, you get everything. Horizon Capital, my bank accounts, all of it. I walk away with nothing. Do you have a nerve? Jessica's pupils dilated. My wager landed like a bombshell, sending shockwaves through her carefully controlled world. A tenfold increase in 1 month. It wasn't a business projection. It was a fantasy. Kevin, standing beside her, reacted like a dog defending its territory. Michael, who the hell do you think you are? You don't get to make bets with Jessica, he spat. What happens when you lose? Your pathetic little fortune is a rounding error for the Miller family. I'm betting my entire world, I said, my gaze never leaving Jessica's. All you have to risk is a piece of paper you were going to throw away anyway. By any calculation, you can't lose. Jessica's mind was in turmoil. Logic screamed that it was impossible. The value of a derelict property couldn't multiply by 10 and 30 days unless someone struck oil. But something else, a flicker of intuition, saw the unshakable, almost arrogant certainty in my eyes and wondered, what if this man had been performing miracles ever since he woke up in that hospital? Jessica, don't listen to him. He's a lunatic trying to drag you down with him. Kevin pleaded. Jessica took a deep breath, her eyes clearing, the familiar ice returning. Fine, she said, her voice steady. I'll take your bet. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. No one could believe that Jessica Miller, the ice queen of Chicago's business world, would agree to such a ludicrous wager. Kevin's face went white. Jessica, are you crazy? She didn't even look at him. A verbal agreement isn't binding, she said to me. We'll put it in writing. Of course. A few minutes later, a contract was drafted by an on-site lawyer. The terms were spelled out in cold, hard print. In 1 month, if an independent appraisal valued the land at less than $250 million, my entire net worth will be transferred to Jessica Miller. If it was valued at or above that amount, our divorce agreement would be permanently voided. After we both signed, I looked at Jessica and smiled. Get ready to be Mrs. Thompson for the rest of your life. Then, I turned and walked out of the gala, leaving a trail of stunned, scornful, and bewildered gazes in my wake. The story of my insane bet spread through Chicago's elite circles like wildfire. Overnight, I became a citywide joke. The lucky fool who'd let his one big win go to his head, now destined for an epic fall. Morale at Horizon Capital plummeted. Several of my top analysts quit, refusing to have their careers tied to a madman. Even Jessica's father, Robert Miller, called me. He was polite but paternalistic, gently advising me to be more grounded and less impulsive. I ignored it all. I went to the office every day, managed my other investments, and behaved as if the $25 million sword hanging over my head didn't exist. The days ticked by. The 1-month deadline loomed closer. The land remained a barren, forgotten lot. Kevin was in his element, holding court in every bar and boardroom, recounting my stupidity and positioning himself as Jessica's de facto fiancé, ready to comfort her after I was gone. Jessica herself remained silent. She didn't contact me, made no public statements. She was waiting, just like everyone else, for the final verdict. Day 20, day 25, day 29. It was the last day. The official appraisal was scheduled for the following morning. The entire city was watching. That evening, I got a call from a gloating Kevin. Michael, tomorrow's the big day. The end of the line for you. I've already scouted out a nice spot for you under a bridge. Don't be late, haha. His manic laughter echoed down the line. I hung up without a word. A moment later, a text came through. It was from Jessica. Just 3 words. Are you okay? I stared at the screen for a long time. It was the first time she had reached out in a month. There was no mockery in her words, no pressure. Just something I couldn't quite decipher. Never better, I texted back. I put down my phone and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows of my penthouse, looking out at the glittering expanse of the city. It was time. I dialed a number. Hello, Director Evans. Michael Thompson. A cheerful voice answered on the other end. Mr. Thompson, I've been waiting for your call. Everything's set on your end? Our press conference is scheduled for 9 a.m. sharp. Everything is ready, I said with a smile. Just as we planned. I ended the call and looked at the moon hanging in the night sky. Jessica, I murmured to the empty room. Did you really think I was betting on luck? I was betting on the future. The next morning, 9 a.m., the main auditorium at City Hall was packed. Every major news outlet had cameras set up. The word was out. The mayor's office was about to make a major announcement. Jessica was in the audience. As one of the city's most prominent business leaders, she'd been invited. She wore a severe white suit, her face an unreadable mask, but the way she gripped her purse betrayed her inner tension. Kevin was beside her, beaming, looking around the room like a king surveying his domain. He even made a point of stopping by my seat in the back corner. "After today, Michael," he whispered, his voice dripping with venom, "you'll have nothing, and Jessica will finally see you for the worthless parasite you are. You lost." I just smiled, said nothing, and watched the stage. At precisely 9 o'clock, the city's director of planning, a man named Evans, stepped up to the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen of the press, honored guests, good morning," he began, his voice booming through the speakers. "On behalf of the mayor and the city of Chicago, I am here today to announce a transformative new initiative. After months of careful planning and approval from the state legislature, we are proud to officially launch the Illinois Innovation Corridor. This project, centered right here in our city, will create a global hub for artificial intelligence, biotechnology, and renewable energy. Total investment is projected to exceed $50 billion. The room exploded. A tidal wave of noise and flashing lights washed over the auditorium. $50 billion. An innovation corridor. This was the biggest economic news the city had seen in a decade. Director Evans waited for the chaos to subside before continuing. "And now, I'd like to show you the official zoning map for the project's initial phase." The massive screen behind him lit up with a high-resolution satellite map of the city. Evans used a laser pointer to trace a large red circle over a section of the industrial south side. "All parcels within this red line will be designated as the core development zone," he announced. "The city will be acquiring all private land within this zone via eminent domain, with compensation set at 3 times the current fair market value." The moment the red circle settled on the map, Jessica's eyes widened in shock. She stared at the screen, her body trembling slightly. The very center of that circle, the area designated as the absolute heart of the new project, was a place she now knew all too well. It was the exact plot of land I had paid $25 million for at the auction, and the adjacent plot I had bought for pennies before that. Both of my properties were sitting on the future equivalent of Park Place and Boardwalk. 3 times fair market value. A month ago, the market value was next to nothing. But now, with this announcement, the land's value had just gone supernova. $250 million was a joke. It was worth $1 billion, easy. Jessica's head whipped around, her eyes frantically searching the crowd. When her gaze finally met mine, she saw the calm, knowing smile on my face. And she finally understood. It was never a gamble. He wasn't betting. He knew. Beside her, Kevin, who had been preening with victory just moments before, was now completely frozen. His mouth hung open. His face was the color of ash. He looked like his soul had been ripped out of his body. "No, impossible. How is this possible?" He stammered, his world crumbling around him. He had schemed and plotted to watch me burn, only to witness me ascend into the heavens. The press conference continued, but no one heard a word. Everyone in that room had the same thought. The South Side was about to become the most valuable real estate on the planet. The moment the conference ended, my phone erupted. It was a cacophony of calls, congratulations, partnership offers, insane bids to buy my land. I didn't answer a single one. I stood up and walked through the frenzied crowd until I was standing in front of Jessica. So I asked softly, "Who lost?" Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Her eyes were a whirlwind of shock, confusion, and something else. Something she had never felt before. "How did you know?" she finally whispered, asking the question that defied all logic. "I told you I came back from the future," I said with a half smile. "Would you believe me?" She wouldn't, of course. To her, I was just a man shrouded in an impenetrable mystery. "Our bet," I said, pausing for effect. "Does it still stand?" A barely perceptible shiver went through her. "A deal is a deal." She looked at me, her expression more complex than I had ever seen it, but her words were firm. Jessica Miller never went back on her word. She had lost. "Jessica, you can't." Kevin, finally snapping out of his stupor, lunged forward. "Shut up," Jessica snapped, her voice like cracking ice. This doesn't concern you. Kevin froze, his face a mottled mess of red and white. He couldn't process how his perfect plan had backfired so spectacularly, turning him from the victor into the court jester. Jealousy and rage, like acid, ate away at his composure. "Don't you get cocky, Michael," he screamed, his face contorting into an ugly snarl. "You're a cheat, a goddamn con artist. You must have stolen that information. I'm reporting you for insider trading." I didn't even bother to look at him. "Kevin," I said conversationally, "a month ago, you told me my company wouldn't last a week. Your predictions seem to be a little off." Oh, and by the way," I added, as if just remembering something, "that futures contract you advised me to short on margin. You wouldn't happen to have been taking the opposite position, would you? Going long and cleaning up while I was being wiped out." My words hit him like a physical blow. The blood drained from his face, leaving it a waxy, terrifying white. You're lying." "I didn't," he stammered, but his panicked eyes gave him away. Jessica froze, her head snapping toward Kevin, her gaze suddenly as sharp as a surgeon's scalpel. She was brilliant, just blinded by her preconceived notion of me as a failure. Now that the veil was lifted, the pieces began clicking into place. Kevin's coincidental bad advice, his immediate appearance after my ruin, his transparent attempts to move in on her. A sickening realization dawned in her mind. "Kevin," Jessica's voice was dangerously quiet. "Is what he's saying true?" "Jessica, he's trying to poison you against me. I would never hurt him," he pleaded, sweat beading on his forehead. "Really?" I said with a cold smile. I took out my phone and played a recording. "Dude, you're a genius. That moron Michael is probably taking a nosedive off a roof as we speak. So how are we splitting the profits from our short position?" It was a voice I recognized as one of Kevin's sycophants. Then, Kevin's voice, arrogant and smug. "Relax. Once that Ice Queen Jessica divorces him, I'll swoop in. I bag her. We get control of the whole Miller empire." The recording was a product of my future knowledge. I knew exactly which of Kevin's fair-weather friends to bribe and what buttons to push to get him to brag. I had been holding on to it, waiting for the perfect moment to utterly destroy him. This was it. When the recording finished, the area fell silent. Everyone who had lingered was staring at Kevin with open disgust. He crumpled, looking at me with a mixture of terror and disbelief. You set me up." "I just returned the favor," I said, pocketing my phone. "Arg." With a primal scream of rage, Kevin launched himself at me. I'll kill you, you son of a bitch." He never reached me. 2 security guards tackled him, slamming him to the ground. The once dapper young professional was now a writhing, pathetic mess, screaming obscenities as he was dragged away. Jessica watched it all, her face pale. A wave of nausea and fear washed over her. To think she had considered this vile creature a friend. To think she had almost let his lies convince her to cast me aside completely. She turned and looked at me. The man she had once despised, the man she thought she knew, was now an enigma, deeper and more formidable than anyone she had ever met. What other secrets was he hiding? With Kevin gone, dragged away like the trash he was, the press conference concluded in the most dramatic fashion imaginable. I had won. I had saved our marriage, cleared my name, and exposed the man who had ruined me. Jessica was, without a doubt, the most conflicted person in the room. She looked at me, opened her mouth to speak, but seemed unable to decide what to say. An apology? A thank you? A question? Nothing seemed to fit. In the end, she simply walked out of the auditorium with me in silence. In the parking garage, she stopped beside her Maserati, and I stopped beside my new Bentley. The 2 cars sat side by side, a silent declaration of the shift in our dynamic. "Get in. I'll drive you," I said, opening the passenger door for her. After a moment's hesitation, she slid into the seat. The car moved smoothly through the city, the silence in the cabin thick with unspoken thoughts. I could feel her tension. This was probably the first time she had ever sat in a man's passenger seat, other than her chauffeur's. "That recording," she said finally, unable to bear the quiet any longer. "When did you get it?" "A while ago," I answered vaguely. The secret of my rebirth was my ultimate advantage, a truth I could never share. She seemed to understand she wouldn't get a real answer and changed the subject. The innovation corridor. You really knew about it beforehand. I told you I bet on the future, I said with a slight smile. I just see things other people don't. That's all. It was an arrogant statement, but after the miracle I had just pulled off, it felt like a simple statement of fact. Jessica asked no more questions. She just watched the city blur past her window, lost in thought. We pulled up to the mansion on the North Shore. It was the first time I had been back since I moved out. Maria saw us arrive together, and her jaw dropped. When she noticed that Jessica's expression, while still reserved, had lost its Arctic chill, she looked as if she'd seen a ghost. Mr. Thompson, Ms. Miller, you're home. Maria, could you make something to eat? I'm starving, I said, my tone easy and natural. Oh, yes, of course, right away, she stammered, scurrying toward the kitchen. Jessica glanced at me, but said nothing, heading straight up the grand staircase. I knew she needed time to process everything that had happened. I settled onto the living room sofa and turned on the TV. The business channels were all screaming about the innovation corridor, with my face and my newly appraised land values splashed across the screen. $250 million? That was the floor. The government's buyout alone would be worth 4 times that. If I developed it myself, the value was incalculable. Sometime later, Jessica came back downstairs, changed into a simple sweater and pants. Without her corporate armor, she looked softer, less intimidating. She sat on the sofa opposite me, the coffee table a buffer between us. Michael, she began. Yeah. We need to talk. Okay. Just then, Maria emerged from the kitchen with a bowl of steaming chicken and rice soup. Sir, your soup. I took the bowl, the savory aroma filling the air. Then, without a second thought, I pushed it across the coffee table toward Jessica. You eat, I said. I'm sure you haven't had a bite all day. Jessica froze. She looked at the soup, then back at me. In the warm light of the living room, my expression was calm, gentle. She couldn't remember the last time someone had asked if she'd eaten. Her parents asked about her profits, her employees about her decisions. Everyone treated her like a goddess or a machine. Only him, the man she had once held in the lowest esteem, was now, in her moment of greatest confusion, offering her a bowl of warm soup. A strange warmth bloomed in her chest, a feeling so foreign it was shocking, and it instantly shattered the icy wall she had spent a lifetime building. To her own astonishment, her eyes began to burn. Jessica's vulnerability was fleeting. She quickly turned her head away, hiding her face, her voice slightly hoarse when she spoke. I'm not hungry. You have it. I didn't press her. I took the bowl and began to eat slowly. The silence returned, but it was different now. Less awkward, more charged. Michael, she said again, once I had nearly finished. Our marriage. It was arranged by my grandfather. She spoke as if recounting a business deal. I agreed to give him peace of mind. I assumed it would be a partnership of convenience. I listened quietly. The old Michael never knew this. He thought she had married him for love, which was the source of all his insecurity. But I never expected you. She paused, searching for the right words. You were nothing like I imagined. You had no ambition, no drive. All you cared about was following me around. I'll admit, I was disappointed and annoyed. So you wanted a divorce? I finished for her. She nodded. But now, she looked up, her cool gray eyes filled with genuine confusion for the first time. I don't understand you at all. What happened to you? It was the one question I could never answer. I couldn't tell her that her husband had spent 10 years in another timeline, clawing his way from the gutter to a height that even she would have to look up to. I set the empty bowl down and looked at her. People change, I said simply. My way of changing was just a little extreme. I tapped my temple. Maybe Sarah was right. Maybe the fall knocked something loose, or knocked something into place. It was a weak explanation, but it was the only one I could give. Jessica didn't push. She just watched me, as if trying to solve a puzzle by staring at the pieces. Let's leave the past in the past, I said, standing up. I walked around the coffee table and sat down next to her. The space between us vanished. I could feel the faint, cool aura of her body next to mine. She instinctively tensed, about to move away, but my next words froze her in place. Your past is something I couldn't be a part of, I said, looking directly into her eyes. But your future? I'm all in. It wasn't a pickup line. It was a statement of fact, a declaration of intent from a man who knew he could back it up. Jessica's heart skipped a beat. She had heard a lifetime of flattery, but no one had ever spoken to her with such calm, possessive authority about her own future. It was arrogant, it was domineering, and for some reason, coming from him, it felt safe. As if with him by her side, the biggest storms would be nothing more than ripples in a pond. Who said you could be? She stammered, looking away, her voice losing its edge. I smiled. I saw that the tips of her ears had turned a delicate shade of pink. So the iceberg could melt after all. That night's conversation was the key that unlocked the door between us. Though our days still weren't filled with sweet nothings, the foundation of our relationship had fundamentally shifted. I didn't move back into the mansion the next day, but Jessica did something unprecedented. She had Sarah deliver a dossier to my office. It was on Patrick Donovan and his real estate empire. The Donovans were old money bullies. They had missed the boat on the innovation corridor, but they wouldn't take that lying down. They would do whatever it took to claw back a piece of the pie, and as the man holding the most valuable parcel, I was their primary target. Jessica's message was clear. She was warning me. She was aligning with me. We were no longer just husband and wife. We were allies. I scanned the file, noting the Donovans' history of shady dealings, a cold smile touching my lips. Patrick Donovan. In my last life, the old bastard had been a thorn in my side for 5 years before I finally managed to bankrupt him. I hadn't expected to cross paths with him so soon in this one. Fine by me. It would save me the trouble of hunting him down later. I called Jessica directly. Got the file. Thanks. She sounded surprised by my directness. Don't thank me. The Donovans are my competition, too. Helping you helps me. Still playing it cool. Are you free for dinner tonight? I asked. We should discuss strategy. Okay. This time, her hesitation was less than a second. That evening, in a quiet, private dining room, she met me. The chill was still there, but it was tempered with a new look, respect. Patrick Donovan is paranoid, but he's also greedy, I said, getting straight to the point. He'll try to get my land. He can't take it by force, so he'll do it with subterfuge. A corporate trap? She asked, instantly on my wavelength. Exactly, I nodded. He'll offer me a deal that looks too good to be true, a high-yield joint venture of some kind. He'll get me to commit all my capital, then pull the rug out from under me. Once my liquidity is gone, he'll force me to sell him the land for pennies on the dollar. It was Donovan's signature move, one I knew all too well. Jessica frowned. So what's your plan? Refuse the offer. No, I laughed. Why refuse? I never turned down free money. You're going to play his game? You're smart, I said with a snap of my fingers. He thinks he's the fisherman, but he has no idea he's the one swimming right into my net. I laid out my plan for her. A plan to not only take Donovan's bait, but to use his own trap to drag his entire corporation into a financial black hole of our own making. It was a massive, complex, and incredibly risky strategy. One wrong move, and we'd both be ruined. When I finished, Jessica was silent for a long time. Her eyes shone with a strange light, a mixture of shock, admiration, and the thrill of a grandmaster who has finally met her equal. Michael, you are completely insane, she said at last. Takes one to know one, I replied, raising my glass. So, Ms. Miller, care to go insane with me? She looked at me for a long moment, then slowly raised her own glass. The crystal chimed as they touched. To our partnership, she said, and for the first time, a smile, small but breathtaking, touched her lips. For the next 2 weeks, Jessica and I were inseparable. We were a two-person war council, spending our days and nights alternating between my office and hers, refining every detail of our plan. Everything unfolded just as I had predicted. Patrick Donovan came to me with a meticulously crafted proposal to co-develop a green energy project overseas. The projected returns were astronomical. If I hadn't known it was a trap, I might have fallen for it myself. I feigned reluctance for a few days before enthusiastically signing on. With Jessica's help, we created a convincing illusion. We made it look like Horizon Capital was liquidating assets, leveraging my land, and pouring every available dollar into Donovan's overseas project. The old shark took the bait. The moment he thought I was overextended and helpless, we sprang our trap. Jessica used her network to launch a coordinated attack on the Donovan Group's most vulnerable public stocks, while I used my future knowledge to trigger several financial time bombs I knew were buried deep within his company's balance sheets. The assault was overwhelming. The Donovan Group's stock price didn't just fall, it nosedived off a cliff. By the time Patrick Donovan realized he was the one who'd been trapped, it was too late. He tried to pull his funds from the overseas project, only to discover that we had already shuffled the money through a labyrinth of shell corporations, leaving him with a portfolio of worthless assets. It was a total rout. Banks called in his loans. Investors dumped his stock. His empire, once thought untouchable, crumbled in less than a week. Patrick Donovan looked like he had aged 20 years overnight. He couldn't fathom how he, a veteran of countless corporate wars, had been so thoroughly outplayed by me. In the end, he and his pathetic son Kyle came to my office, hats in hand. "Mr. Thompson, I concede," the once mighty tycoon said, his voice hollow. "I'm begging you. Please leave my family with something." I looked at him, my face impassive. "When you tried to humiliate me at that auction, were you planning on leaving me with anything?" He had no answer. Ultimately, I orchestrated a deal where Jessica's company, Miller Corp., acquired all of the Donovan Group's prime assets for a fraction of their value. In a single move, Miller Corp. Nearly doubled in size, becoming the undisputed hegemon of the Chicago business world. Horizon Capital also made a fortune, cementing my reputation as a financial prodigy. We were the city's new power couple. At the victory party, Jessica, flushed from a bit of champagne, came to my side and handed me a folded document. I opened it. It was our sign bet. "You won," she said, a complex smile playing on her lips. "As agreed, it's void." She held out a lighter. The message was clear. She wanted me to be the one to burn it. I looked at the paper, then at her. As our colleagues and employees watched, I took the lighter, but I didn't light it. Instead, I folded the document carefully and then again and tucked it into the inside pocket of my suit jacket, right over my heart. "Why would you keep it?" she asked, confused. I looked at her and smiled. "Because this is the first thing I ever won from you. It's the first proof that you're truly mine." Jessica's face instantly flushed a deep, beautiful crimson. After the party, I drove Jessica home. Same Bentley, same passenger seat. But the atmosphere was entirely different now, filled with a warm, comfortable intimacy. I never thought it would be like this," she said quietly, looking out the window. "Like what?" "Us," she said. "I always assumed our story would end at the courthouse, signing papers and walking away as strangers." "That was your assumption," I said, pulling up to the mansion. I turned to look at her. From the moment I woke up in that hospital, I was rewriting the ending. My words were as confident and domineering as ever. But now, she found she liked the way they made her feel. "We're here." "Okay." We walked into the quiet house. Maria had already gone to bed, leaving a single warm lamp on in the living room. At the base of the stairs, Jessica stopped. "Well, I'm going up." "Wait," I said. She turned back, a questioning look in her eyes. I took the folded contract from my pocket and held it out to her. "This belongs to you now. But you said you wanted to keep it." "That was for the crowd," I said, my voice low and serious. "But for you, I want you to know this. I don't need a piece of paper to prove anything. I want you to choose this. To choose me." I took her hand and placed the folded paperback in her palm. Her skin was cool to the touch, but a jolt like static electricity passed between us. She looked down at the contract, then back up at me. The warm light softened the sharp angles of my face. My eyes, which she had seen command boardrooms and destroy rivals, were now filled with a deep, unwavering tenderness. She stared at me for a long moment, and then a slow, brilliant smile spread across her face. It was like watching a glacier calve in the spring sun, a spectacular, breathtaking event that revealed a vibrant, living world beneath. Then, right there in front of me, she tore the contract into tiny pieces. The white shreds fluttered from her fingers like confetti. "Michael," she said, her eyes, once as cold as winter, now shining like stars. "From now on, there's no contract, no bet. There's only us." I didn't say anything. I just reached out and pulled her into my arms. Her body was stiff for a second, then melted against mine. She wrapped her arms around my back, holding on tight. I could smell the jasmine in her hair, feel the strong, steady beat of her heart against my chest. In that moment, I had the whole world. The two souls, the two timelines finally became one. The timid failure who jumped from a roof and the lonely titan who died in an explosion were gone. Now, there was only Michael Thompson, Jessica Miller's husband. 6 months later, Miller Corp and Horizon Capital officially merged to form Apex Industries. With Michael as chairman and Jessica as CEO, they became the most formidable force in American business. During an interview for a major financial magazine, a journalist asked Jessica, "Ms. Miller, your partnership with Mr. Thompson is the stuff of legends. Everyone says you conquered a business genius with your charm and intelligence. How did you do it?" Jessica looked at Michael, who was watching her with a gentle smile. A slow, beautiful blush crept up her neck. She turned back to the camera. "You've got it all wrong," she said, her voice full of a warmth the world had never heard from her before. "From the very beginning, I was his endgame.